In the spring, just before Easter, my sister Patty and I would make Easter baskets for our cousins. Well, our best ones were the duck baskets made out of yellow plastic bleach bottles, and the beaks were orange felt. Well, do you remember sharing crafts with your sister? Patty is just 15 months younger than me, but we have always been so close. I feel like she is my twin sister. Well, here's a picture of all of us taken at Easter in 1958. Patty and I are next to one another in our Easter bonnets. It's just so cute. And this one was taken at our parents' 50th wedding anniversary. Amazing. Our smiles are still the same, but I will never be as thin as she is. Well, I'm dedicating this quilt to my twin sister, Patty. The blocks are tiny 5-inch pinwheel blocks and just cheery spring colors. They remind me of those Easter craft days with Patty. Well, I named the quilt Twin Sisters after I found this old newspaper clipping. Well, the headline is Quilt Shares in Sad Love Story of Twin Sisters. It's by Nancy Cabot, who wrote a syndicated column appearing in the Chicago Tribune in the 1930s. Well, the story goes, Twin Sisters is a striking pattern which was first made in 1845 in Pennsylvania. There is a tragic story concerning this pattern. A pair of quilts was made for the hope chests of a pair of twins. Well, 3 weeks before their marriages were to have taken place, one of the twins fell ill and died. Her quilt was passed on to the other sister's great-granddaughter. Just a sad story. You know, that was over 150 years ago. But today, we will revive the Twin Sisters quilt. There is a happy ending to that sad story. Originally, the blocks were made with templates, but now they're made quite quickly with strips. With a half strip of medium and a half strip of dark, you can make 2 blocks. Thus, they're twins again. Well, take a look at this block. It's made with yellow and blue. Well, the way they're sewn together, the blue ends up in the center in this block. So I call it the positive block. Now, made at the very same time is this one. The yellow's in the center now, or the negative block. So the whole quilt is just made of positive and negative blocks. Well, for instance, this one. Gold is in the center and blue around the outside edges, and made at the same time. Now the blue is in the center. And this one up here, it's a yellow large-scale print with green, and down in the corner, it's mate. It's the green in the center. Well, Judy Jackson did the quilting. It's just wonderful windmill kind of swirling around there. The whole quilt is set together with 2-inch lattice and cornerstones. And then you can just take the extra strips, sew them together for the rainbow border. It's just perfect. Well, this is a perfect quilt for fat quarters. Now, I know you have fat quarters, but personally, I would just love to go into the quilt shop, pick up a whole stack of fat quarters that the quilt shop already coordinated for me. Oh my gosh, what a time saver. That's what I just love to do. Go shopping for fat quarters. Well, for the wall hanging, you need to have 7 medium fat quarters and 7 dark fat quarters. Pretty easy to do. And then you just start pairing them up. For instance, there's a nice flowered texture in this one. Look cute with the check. That works. I like that one. Or how about this check with this medium print? You always want to have some variation in your scale and in your values so they work together. Well, I put my fat quarters already right sides together so they're ready for sewing. Let's just take a look. I paired up with the dark on the top. This is one that reads solid from a distance with the medium scale yellow. They're right sides together. The next pair is this large scale print with the green I pulled from the leaves. That's working good. And then this one, oh, I love that solid gold with the little gold flowers in it. We'll get them all lined up, cut edge at the top, and salvage at the bottom. Now the strips are 2.5 inches. So the first thing I want to do is just go ahead, trim off that outside edge, straighten it, and get rid of it. Now I put some glow line tape on my ruler at 2.5 inches so that I can just quickly cut right across there. Now they're ready for sewing, so I don't even have to restack. For a wall hanging, you cut 4 sets of 2.5-inch strips. And then with anything that you have left over, cut it into 2-inch squares for the cornerstones. Well, I've got those 4 done. Oh my goodness, the 2-inch, and I am ready for sewing. So you can just take these pieces, stack them up, and get them right beside your machine. These I'll cut into 2-inch squares in just a minute. Pick up the first pair. You want to use a 1/4-inch seam allowance and 15 stitches to the inch. Boy, I never change, do I? 1/4-inch or 15 stitches to the inch is actually like 2.0 stitch length on your computerized sewing machine. Split them right sides together and zoom along there. Now if you want to dig out your scraps, that's fine. Dig out your scraps. You're going to need to have 13 half strips of medium and 13 half strips of dark. And that's just for your blocks. Now, this is only 25 blocks for your wall hanging, but it gets more as you go along. For a lap, you need to have 40, a total of 40 strips for 40 blocks. For twin, it's 117. A queen is 143 blocks. Oh my gosh, a king is 169 blocks. You know, they're only 5 inches, so it takes lots of blocks. Okay, the reason I put the dark on the top was because I wanted to set the seam with the dark on the top, so that seam will be right behind the dark and ready for going on. So just lead with your fingers, press that open, and you're ready for cutting. Well, I'm going to get the rest of them pressed, and I'll show you how to cut them into blocks. I had fun sewing my strips together. Well, my twin sister Patty is also a stripper. We just keep it in the family. Well, the first thing you want to do with your pressed strips is measure the width of them. The ideal measurement is 4.5, but you should check yours because we're going to cut these strips into squares. So cut whatever your measurement is. Just go over, line up 2 or even 3 if you want with dark across the top, and then I'm just going to go ahead and square off at that left edge. You know, it's so much easier if you go ahead and cut multiples at a time. Okay, just take those ends, get rid of them, and then cut both sets into 4.5-inch squares or whatever your measurement is. That way you can get them done quickly and be ready to go on to the blocks. To make a negative block and a positive block, you need to have a total of 4 squares. So just line those up. There's just a little bit left over on the end. You can go ahead and cut this part into 2.5-inch pieces. Just make some 4-patch out of them. It's a lot of fun. Now I'm just going to take this one set it aside, and show you how to cut these squares. Just leave them with the dark at the top and consistently place your ruler on the diagonal and cut straight across. You can just pick up your ruler, move it along there, and then we're going to do the magic thing. Oh my gosh, this is magical. Take your yellows, the part of the block that is mostly yellow, put those in one stack, and then take your blues and put those in a second stack. Now this is going to be the positive block, so focus on right here, right in this point, and turn all 4 pieces so that they meet right in that center. Ta-da! That's the positive block. I told you that's magical. Now do the same thing with the negative, with the yellow. Focus on that little corner spot right there. Turn them all right around, and like magic, you have twin sisters. Just so much fun to do. Now, I'm going to take and sew straight down through the middle on both of these. So you take the piece on the right, flip it over to the left, and just take this one, the right, over to the left. So I can just assembly line sew. Well, it's a good time to use your stiletto. It helps match up your pieces. So at least start right up here with them all lined up. And go ahead and use your 1/4 inch seam, hold them together, pick up this end right here, line it up, hold it flat, and then from one, just go straight into that second half. Just kind of assembly line, sew it right through, and match it up, keep it going. And I'm just going to repeat that with the second block. Well, I'm going to tell you about my sister Patty's first stripping experience. She was traveling with me. My sons, Grant and Orion, Patty and I were driving from San Francisco down to Morro Bay. We were all packed in a little rabbit, all the people and all the quilts. Pretty crowded, but I started teaching in the morning at a quilt shop in Morro Bay, and I do not know what happened. By the time the afternoon came, I was so sick I could not go on. Let me continue the story, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so just clip apart right here, clip it apart into the 2 blocks, and open them up like this, and just flip the right piece onto the left and push this top seam up and the underneath seam down. That locks them together, especially when that top seam just shoves into the underneath seam. Looking good. Well, anyhow, as I was feeling really ill, Patty walked into the store in her bathing suit. She was on the way to the beach with my sons. I said, Patty, you have to teach for me. I'm so sick. She said, Elle, I have never done any quilting in my whole life. I said, don't worry. All you have to do is look at the pictures, just do what it says. So she was brave. I went home. She stayed there in her bathing suit and taught the class. Well, that afternoon, a photographer from the newspaper came by, and he was supposed to take some pictures of me. Well, actually, I was so sick in bed. Patty was there. He took all of the pictures of Patty. She appeared in the newspaper, and whenever we looked at those photographs, she had sewn all of the blocks backwards. But you know what? She fell in love with stripping that day. She says, oh man, Elle, this is really lots of fun. And she has been out teaching for me ever since. She loves it. All right, let's just take a look, see what they look like. Good match right in the middle. Perfect. Let's see this one. Looks good. Nice, easy, simple block, I think, anyways. Now, we want to make the center very flat. So there was a connecting stitch right here, and I'm just going to cut that connecting stitch with my scissors. And just lay the block flat, wrong side up. Now, we want to swirl these seams around the center. So this seam, I'm going to push to the right. This one is already laying down flat. When I take this seam, I'm going to press it to the left, and the stitches in the center automatically pop open. You just play with it with your fingers and then continue. This seam goes around like this. Then just smush it good right in the center, and you have the cutest little 4-patch. Look from the other side and you can see how nice and flat it is. So let's just take this one and clip this one too. Now, when you press it, you just swirl right around the center and the block lays completely flat. Personally, I like steam, so I'm just going to start here and just go right around. Press the 4-patch right in the middle, turn it over, press on the opposite side. Looking very good. And then just repeat with this one. Well, I think that they may be perfect, and you may not need to do one single bit of squaring up. But just in case, do some checking on them and you'll find out. They should square up to approximately 5.5 inches. Now I'm going to put the 5.5 inch line right down through the seam and this diagonal line right up through this seam. So just place it right on there, line it up. Oh, it is looking good. But just in case you need to square yours up, let me show you how much I'm going to trim. I'm just trimming off on the top half. And now I'm going to turn it around and trim the bottom half. Just turn it around like this. Do the same measurements, 5.5 right across here, the 5.5 inch line on the stitches, diagonal line right up through there, basically just cutting off those tips. Well, if you think it's worth it to square up those blocks, go ahead and do it. Well, I just have a few more blocks to make, and I'll show you how to sew the whole top together. I'm playing with my blocks, and that's what twin sisters do. Just play with their blocks. Well, I'm making the wall hanging that is 5 rows across and 5 rows down, and I think I have a plan. Begin with your positive block. That's going to go right in the corner. Beside the positive comes the negative, and from that point on, you just keep on alternating. Okay, this is the positive, negative, and positive. Now in the second row, if this is positive, you're going to start with the negative. So let me just split these apart and just see how these 3 rows look that I have laid out. Now when I sew with Patty, she says, nope, Elle, you have to unsew that because you have the same fabrics together. But get more unsewing done than sewing with her. Once you have your whole top laid out, I still have 2 more rows to do. But let me show you. You take your 2-inch lattice, cut the same size as your block. In my case, it's a 5.5 inch lattice. You just lay it around all of the pieces, in between all of the pieces, all of the rows. Let me get one up here. And once the lattice is in place, go to the 2-inch cornerstones. If you would like, you can just do exactly the same, starting with the positive up here in the corner, then switch to the negative and the positive, and just keep on laying out all of your rows. Now to sew these rows together, I like to do vertical rows, straight down, not jumping up and picking each time. I stack up whole rows. So you take the second row, flip it right sides together to the one beside it, and once you have that whole vertical row stacked, you start at the top and just pick up your pieces and place them one on top of the other. And just remember, when you get to your machine, this is the top. That's always the tricky part. Remember where your top is. And then you've got one whole handy stack there. Just pick up those pieces and sew straight down that stack. Well, once you sew the first 2 rows, you just open them up, flip the third row right sides together, keep on going until they're all done. And when you go back across the other way, you press your seams towards the lattice. Well, let me get that done. Twin sisters is twice as much fun. Oh, I just had a great time sewing the top together. Then I added a 2.5 inch framing border on all 4 sides from the background fabric. The rainbow border is next. Now these are also 2.5 inch strips. You need to have 20 of them, a mix of the yellow and the blue. Doesn't matter what order you sew them in. And then I just pressed all of those seams to one side. Now the width of this is supposed to equal the size of your top, and oops, it's back to the drawing board. When I laid them out, this one piece is just a little too long. So this is what I did. I started all over again. Did a whole other set, and this time I went ahead and took a little deeper seam, and you can see right here. First I sewed with 4.0, and then I sewed with a wider seam at 3.0. So I did a couple of them and just kept on measuring against the top. And now I think I've got it. So once you've got that all done, press those seams in one direction and cut them into 5-inch strips. Well, this half strip is really enough to do both of the sides. So just lay out your half strip and get that all lined up. Let me keep it straight on the grid. Okay, line up your ruler. Oh, I'm so good with those markings on my ruler. I've got 5 inches. Too many times people walk into the room and talk to me, and the next thing I know, I'm cutting it all wrong. I'm just going to cut 2 so I can show you how it all fits. All right, so the first thing to do is sew your strip down 2 sides. And whenever you put that on there, the best way is actually turn your strip so that you don't fight your seams. Make your seams go down. And then when you do on the other side, the seams would go always with the way you're sewing. Well, sew those 2 sides on, fold them out, and press your seams towards the background. Next comes 5-inch cornerstones. Now you're going to add your cornerstones first to your strip like this. Let's see if we can get a different color. Oh, you might want to turn it around. 2 yellows. Ooh, maybe that's not so good. So let's just turn around here. That's better. So since we've got a yellow and a green, how about a blue right in there? You sew your 5-inch squares to both ends, press your seams towards the squares, and that way they're going to lock together. And then just sew it right onto your quilt top. It's looking good. I have some students' quilts to show you. Twin sisters quilts are so much fun to make that my students got in the act. Well, Iko Rogers made this cheery one in bright Kool-Aid colors. Well, each of the fabrics are modeled. They have a hand-dyed look, and that white lattice sets off the pieces. Her quilter, Amy Potter, used multicolored thread, and then she stitched a medallion in the center of every block. And then she did ovals in the rainbow border. Just so nice. Iko used up every last bit of that gorgeous fabric in the scrappy binding. It's just very striking. Well, not to be outdone, Lois BRETZLOFF used similar colors in her blocks, but she changed the look entirely by setting them together with black lattice. Well, she also used multicolored thread in the blocks. She did some fancy cables in the border. Well, we always recognize Lois's quilts for her bright, beautiful colors. Ooh, she just loves them. She even selected a bright backing fabric that says love. Well, my almost twin sister, Sue Bouchard, purchased a big stack of fat quarters at market, and she turned them into this delightful quilt. Ooh, there's polka dots, paisleys, stripes, large prints, small prints. She put everything together, and I just love the vine quilting in the framing border. So nice. Well, I like Sue's idea. She stitches all of her leftovers together into a backing so she can start out fresh with all new fabric on her next quilt. It's just wonderful. So dig into your scraps and strips and have double the fun on Twin Sisters.